So, it is once again the Prime Minister raising his attack against the Congress party for what he calls appeasing Muslims. In fact, the BJP president this morning first tweeted out a video which was endorsed by the Prime Minister. This was a video of former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh sticking to his stand in a press conference in Mumbai in 2007, sticking to the stand that he took in a speech that he made at a meeting of the National Development Council in 2006, that Muslims have the first claim to the nation's resources. Dr. Singh in this video is seen as doubling down on that position. The BJP is also extending the attack against the Congress, saying that this is the mentality of the Congress which made the party's governments in Karnataka and in Andhra Pradesh over the last many years to bring sub-quotas for Muslims within the overall quota for backward castes. The Congress has hit back, saying that this is a sign of Mr. Modi and the BJP getting desperate. They are citing voter turnout data which has been rather depressed, one would say, compared to the earlier data from 2019. Certainly in the first phase, in large parts of Rajasthan that went to polls, in Western Uttar Pradesh, the voter turnout was rather subdued compared to what it was in phase 1 last time around. Even in phase 2, there are pockets where we are seeing voter turnout anywhere between 2 to 5 percentage points lower. So the Congress's contention is that the Prime Minister, the BJP, is sort of resorting to this kind of Muslim bashing only to enthuse their base, the BJP base, and to turn out the vote, because in a case where voter turnout is low, then it could become a question of margins. The BJP may not coast to the kind of victory that it did in 2014 or in 2019. That's the Congress and the opposition's contention. So which of it is true? Is this communal politicking, or is this a sign of appeasement by the Congress party? We'll get to that and more in just a second, but first, the story of the day so far. On a day when 88 constituencies across 13 different states, from Kerala in the south to Jammu in the north, went to polls.
I said minorities, particularly the Muslim minorities, if they are poor, they have prior claim on the resources of the country. I used the word all for all minorities, and I added for mayor, particularly Muslim minorities, if they are poor, they have a prior right on the resources of the country. I stand by that.
डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी का एक और पुराना वीडियो सामने आया है, जिसमें फिर से वो वही कह रहे हैं कि देश के संसाधनों पर पहला हक मुसलमानों का है।
कांग्रेस के घोषणा पत्र में पर्सनल लॉ को हम आगे बढ़ाएंगे, ये बात की। मैं राहुल गांधी जी को पूछना चाहता हूं, पर्सनल लॉ को आप आगे बढ़ाएंगे तो क्या ये देश अब शरिया के आधार पर चलेगा? किस प्रकार का पंथ निरपेक्ष संविधान आप इस देश में चाहते हैं?
असली बात यह है कि बीजेपी खोखलाई हुई है, परेशानी में है। वो जानते हैं दक्षिण भारत में साफ और उत्तर और मध्य भारत में हाफ। इसलिए पुराने मुद्दे को जो इस पर स्पष्टीकरण बार बार दिया गया है, उसी को दोहरा रहे हैं। उनकी एक ही रणनीति है जो 35 दिन बाकी है, ध्रुवीकरण ध्रुवीकरण ध्रुवीकरण।
All right, let me open this up to our guest. Sanju Verma is national spokesperson of the BJP. Aishwarya Mahadev is spokesperson of the Congress Party. Veer Sanghvi, senior journalist and author. Swapan Das Gupta is a former Rajya Sabha member of Parliament and senior journalist. Sanju Verma, the Congress Party is saying, why are you having to resort to what Dr. Manmohan Singh said in 2006 at the NDC, or what he said subsequently in 2009, the video that BJP handles have put out today? These are issues that are well settled from 15 years ago. If you're so confident of 400 Par or Mission 370 or what have you, why are you relying on 15-year-old videos?
You know, Zaka, first things first. let it be known to everybody that BJP stands for justice for all, appeasement of none. Whereas if you look at the history and track record of the Congress party, I mean, let truth be told, it was way back in 1994 that Veerappa Moily, when he was the Chief Minister of Karnataka, he decided that Muslims need to be categorized under the OBC category to ensure that they get relevant reservations. Now, I'm not going to get into the fact as to whether Muslims need to be clubbed under the OBC category and get reservations, because they are indeed getting the benefit of reservations. I'll tell you where the problem is and what exactly the BJP is trying to highlight. You know, for instance, let us look at what happened recently in 2021. Maharashtra issue came up before the Supreme Court. What exactly were the Supreme Court's observations? The Supreme Court said a Rahim can get reservation, not because he's Rahim. Abdul can get reservation, not because he's Abdul. Gautam can get reservation, not because he's Gautam. You know, Tom can get reservation, not because he's Tom, but because of a Gautam, a Tom, and Abdul and Rahim claim that they are backward. So religion cannot be the basis for wanting reservation. This has been upheld in the Supreme Court in various judgments, 1992, 1995, 2014, 2021. Now the problem arises that in Maharashtra you already have 52% reservation beyond the mandated 50% which the Supreme Court allows. Now Muslims are claiming reservations within this 52% quota along with Hindus, Christians, Jains, Buddhists, what have you. So far so good. What is not acceptable is that now beyond this 52%, and Uddhav Thackeray wanted that 4% should be reserved for Muslims, quota within quota, which is precisely what Siddaramaiah is trying to do and which is precisely what Basavaraj Bommai wanted to eradicate. In Karnataka also the overall reservation is at 51.23%. Now, Basavaraj Bommai said backward Muslims, deprived Muslims are already getting the benefit of reservation within the overall umbrella of 51.3%. What was the need to have another 4% under the B2 category, which is what Siddaramaiah has now decided to give to the Muslims, which means pehle aapko overall umbrella ke andar bhi reservation milega, then you will also enjoy the benefits of reservation exclusively for a certain community on the basis of religion, because there's a quota within quota, reservation within reservation. It is this reservation within reservation, quota within quota, which is what the BJP is against.
One second, ma'am. One second. In the specific case of Karnataka, my understanding is that in 1994, Veerappa Moili's government brought this in just as the polls were about to be called. In 1995, H.D. Devegowda led Janata Dal, at that time united government, implemented this. It was when Mr. Devegowda was Chief Minister that the Assembly passed this. In April 2023, the Basavaraj Bommai government scrapped this 4% quota, and this 4% quota in Karnataka, my understanding is within the 32% OBC quota. So it's within the OBC quota, this 4%, and the Basavaraj Bommai government scrapped it, gave 2% to Lingayats, gave 2% to Vokaligas. Matter went to court. The Supreme Court pulled up the Bommai government, and the Bommai government said, we're not making any new appointments for government jobs or in educational institutions on the basis of this 4% quota. It informed the Supreme Court in May 2023, before it demitted office, that it is putting on hold this move.
Yes, Zaka, you know, you talk of 32%, but I'm talking of the overall quota. There is quota in local government bodies in Karnataka as much as in Maharashtra. There's a quota for admission into government schools. There's a quota for getting government jobs. You know, if you add up all these three quotas, you arrive at that number of little over 51% in the case of Karnataka and about 52% odd for Maharashtra. My limited point is this. You can either claim benefit by virtue of being socially, educationally and financially deprived,
okay,
or you can claim benefits under the garb of being a religious and linguistic minority who deserves certain special benefits. What the Supreme Court has said in various judgments, let us not quote one judgment, is you cannot say that I am a poor Abdul, so let me get reservation because I'm poor, but because I'm Abdul, I should get minority benefits, wide Article 29 and Article 30 of the Constitution which are clearly aimed at only giving special advantages on the basis of language and religion to certain minorities. My point is, what the Supreme Court has said is you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can either claim reservation or claim linguistic and minority related benefits under Article 29 and 30.
Okay, let me ask Aishwarya Mahadev. So, the speech that Dr. Manmohan Singh made in 2006 at the National Development Council was, and he said, and I quote, "We have to devise innovative plans to empower minorities, empower Muslims for equitable share in development. Minorities, particularly Muslim minorities, have the first claim on resources." The problem that the BJP and its supporters seem to have is, why did Dr. Manmohan Singh have to say particularly Muslims? Are there no poor Christians or poor Jains or Sikhs or Buddhists? Why particularly Muslims have the first claim on the nation's resources?
Good evening, Zaka. I have an official clarification also from the office of the PMO, which I will send, which was issued on 10th December 2006. But I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it because there's a whole load of puerile arguments that have come out here. But I'm just going to make a few responses. I believe it's an absolute charlatan sport to use the guise of history in various ways and forms of twisting it in today's context, because you're absolutely bereft and bankrupt of any issues. And when Madam talks about a cap of reservation of such sanctity, you should ask her to look back at what her own party spoke about when they offered 10% on the economically weaker section reservation also. And when you talk about, Mr. Sidramaya offering Muslims this sort of reservation there, ma'am, if you go back and read from the Hagnur committee to the Chinnappa Reddy, from 94 and 95, your own alliance partner, the former Prime Minister, Mr. Deve Gowda, trumpets the fact that he seems to have been the person that instituted this. This is something that has happened for decades. This has been going on for decades, but because the BJP has absolutely nothing else, I'm not going to get into the entirety of what the court battle is, Zaka. I'm going to make this simple. If the BJP is a government that talks about development, that says हमने इतना सारा काम किया है हमारे 10 साल में, why is it that they go back decades in order to try and justify any sort of problems they have today? They are not talking about development. They're not talking about Achhe Din. They're not talking about Vikas. They start talking about patches of land from 74. They start talking about what chief ministers and people who no longer even alive to talk about these instances from that time. And now the greatest joke on all of us is people who said मैं 5 साल में Achhe Din और विकास और सब कुछ ले आऊंगा आपके लिए, अभी 2047 के बारे में बात कर रहे, and that has become the problem of the BJP. This is not even distraction or diversion. This is an absolute shame on democracy that this is what the BJP is resorted to. Let
me get Shobhan Das Gupta and Veer Sanghvi also into this conversation. Shobhan Das Gupta, the point is, again, the political argument being made by the opposition is the Prime Minister said this in first time in a rally in Banswara last Sunday, which was after the first phase of polling, and the feedback seemed to be, and there's data to back this, at least in the first phase, where we have full voter turnout numbers for, in Rajasthan, in Western Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, voter turnout was significantly low, anywhere between 4 to 8% in many of these constituencies. And the fear was that people were not turning out. The BJP voters were not turning out for whatever reason, maybe because of the heat, maybe because, the familiar saying is, Ana hai to Modi ko hi hai, so why should we turn out, and so on and so forth. So therefore, fearing that this would be a low voter turnout contest, a contest of margins, the BJP and the Prime Minister are resorting to their favorite calling card, which is Hindu-Muslim. How do you counter that argument?
Well, I'm not going to counter the argument. What I want to establish for the moment is that in Indian elections, if you go with a positive agenda, and the BJP has a positive agenda, which is called Vikshit Bharat, and when that positive agenda is also coupled with a general recognition that this election somehow has been determined in advance and it belongs to Narendra Modi. And you're quite right in suggesting that there is a degree of complacency, predictability, call it whatever you want to, which is there. Secondly, it is also a fact that a significant section of the opposition, particularly those who believe in having their opposition expressed through
the foreign governments believe that the legitimacy of this elections can be somehow questioned if the turnout turns out to be low. And finally, you have this excruciating heat, which is far more than anyone else had actually anticipated in this. Now, under the circumstances, one of the first thing which Narendra Modi appears to have done, and which he's done in every single election right from the time he fought as a Gujarat chief minister, is that you must find a place where you can oppose someone else, even if you are in government. Whether you go back to the Maut Ka Saudagar, etc.
Okay.
There has always been that element of that, because that's what charges the cadres on the ground. And that could be, I mean, it's a natural thing. Otherwise, you believe that, okay, it's a done deal, elections are a done deal, you don't have to really think. So to that extent, you're quite right in suggesting that one of the features of this is to actually raise the motivational levels of the committed voters and ensure a higher turnout, which is not a bad thing at all. The first time I'm coming across an implicit argument that trying to raise the level of participation in the election is somehow suspect. And that, to my mind, that's a very dodgy argument.
Okay.
The greater the argument. So the point really here at present, which is there, is that it's not really a question of the mechanics, the convoluted logic inside the quotas, within the quotas, etc. But you seized upon something. Then the Congress, which had earlier said, you're not even discussing our manifesto, because and instead you're calling out a Muslim League manifesto, because you're talking about the basis of the India being a unitary state, or India being a quasi-federal, or India being a confederal issue. So suddenly you came across, and they're saying, and it's greeted by a cacophony of contradictory statements by the Congress. Now, naturally, the Prime Minister is going to go for that, go for the jugular in this context. And he's going to get for the jugular, particularly, and I think I would normally I'm a bit skeptical about his other writings, but what Pratap Bhanu Mehta said, that BJP is not merely a political party, the BJP is also an identity. And I think it was the basis of that identity which I think Narendra Modi tried to bring out into things.
Okay.
And I feel that it's a perfectly legitimate thing to do in an election.
So Veer Sanghvi, a lot of people have been railing and ranting, how can the Prime Minister use such language? How can he resort to this kind of almost equating an entire community with Guspetiyan and with jinke zyada bacche ho and so on and so forth. But what is the other side saying? How is that any less polarizing? Rahul Gandhi yesterday in Delhi says, I want to take the wealth from the 10% of the people and redistribute it to 90% of the people. He's been banging on about, there's not one single OBC editor, one single OBC anchor in this country, as though that is the most important issue to the people of this country. I mean, how is that not polarizing? When you're saying this battle is between 90 versus 10, that's just as polarizing.
Yeah, Zaka, I have no problem with anything you said, and I also agree with Shrapan Das Gupta about why Mr. Modi could perhaps be doing this. I think the Congress is trying to fight this election on caste and on class. It's trying to say that the upper castes are in control. We stand up for the backward castes. No other national party has been as vociferous on the subject of a caste census. But when you sort of play the caste game, I don't know if you're necessarily credible because you have no background of doing anything for the backward castes. You also have a problem with the class game, because it was done by Indira Gandhi, if you remember, in 69 and later in 71, 72. And that was a very different India. That was an India which was deprived. It was an India where all the money was controlled by a small section of industry, drawn, if you will forgive the caste reference, from a typical Baniya class. And then I think it made a certain amount of sense. The Congress tried this again in 2004. If you remember the campaign slogans, Congress ka haath, Aam Aadmi ka saath, it was Sonia Gandhi's view that the benefits of liberalization had not reached the masses and we should focus on that. It was a good idea. It seemed to have worked for the Congress, but there was a great deal of difference between the way she did it and the way Rahul has done it. She did it by promising things to people, which they implemented. Manrega, the welfare measures, the direct transfers were all Congress ideas because the Congress believed that the market had failed the poor, and they've now become general ideas. The BJP is implementing them also. At no stage did she say to people, we'll take away money from the rich, we'll give it to the poor. It's not the same India as 1969 or 1972. This is an India where everybody has got better over the last 10 or 12 years, except for people at the margins. This is an aspirational India, not an envious India. So when you go out there and you talk about, I will do this and take this from so and so and give this to so and so, it doesn't necessarily energize the have-nots and it antagonizes the haves. I think that's the problem with the Congress campaign. That's the problem with the way in which Rahul is speaking. But the other issue which we touched on at the beginning, without wishing to debate the whole caste-based stuff again, is why is Mr. Modi talking about caste and religion and all of that? I think there is, as Chopin says, a certain reluctance to come out and vote among the base because they see this as a done deal. Mr. Modi perhaps believes this is the way to energize the base. I don't have a problem with that. I have just one question that's clear to me, I think it's clear to most people. Mr. Modi is going to win. Whether he wins with the margins he expects or not is not relevant. He'll be Prime Minister again. You're going to have to run this country for 5 years, and the country is going to include the minorities, is going to include Muslims. You don't think that the kind of rhetoric you're using now is going to pose problems in the future? I just think enough people haven't asked him that.
Okay. Before I get to that, you know, the other issue about rallying the base, turning up the vote, so on and so forth, the issue, Sanju Verma, is, as Swapan Das Gupta said, as V. Sanghvi said, you know, Mr. Modi is well within his rights to do that. As they say, you have an election to win. So whether if that means using Sam Dam Dhand Bed to win that election, go ahead and do it. The problem though is you still have to run a government beyond that. You still have to have relations with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Qatar and what have you. What happens then?
You know, Zaka, that's a very interesting question. And, you know, I won't be very verbal. I think both the gentlemen made some very pertinent points. I especially would like to borrow the phrase from Veer Sanghvi where he said, today's is an aspirational India. It's not an envious India. And, you know, I will just take off from there and make a few points. First and foremost, you know, since this is a political debate and the Congress panelists said, "Arey, achhe din nahi aaye hain, Modi ji ne kya kar liya hai?" Let me tell you, before the assembly elections in Karnataka, Siddaramaiah and D.K. Shivkumar went about town saying, "Hum har kisi ko, every poor household will get 10 kgs of rice." When they failed to live up to their promise, whom did they blame? They blamed Narendra Modi. A 17-year-old girl was gang raped a few weeks back in Belgavi. Law and order is a state subject. Instead of Siddaramaiah, D.K. Shivkumar and G. Parameshwara taking up accountability, whom did they blame? Narendra Modi. Rameshwaram Cafe blast. It was a terror attack. And Siddaramaiah and D.K. Shivkumar tried to undermine the, seriousness of this entire attack by saying, "Arey, ye to do business groups ke beech mein rivalry thi." Now you've had a horrifying love jihad case of Neha Hiremat. Instead of standing in solidarity with Neha Hiremat's family, the first reaction of Siddaramaiah, the first reaction of D.K. Shivkumar and the entire Congress top brass, including Rahul Gandhi, who otherwise has an opinion on everything under the sun, was that they simply consumed Fevicol. Inke muh mein tala lag gaya, inke muh par Fevicol lag gaya. And last but not the least, I'll tell you, achhe din kise kehte hain? Because, you know, this debate cannot be about people leveling allegations at the BJP and the BJP not responding. After 500 years, thanks to Narendra Modi, Ayodhya Ram Mandir is a reality. After 70 years, Article 370 abrogated for good. After 34 years, it took a leader of Modi's stature to make instant triple talaq illegal. After 20 years, the Chenab Bridge was built in Kashmir. After 26 years, the Atal Tunnel was brought to fruition. After 16 years, the Bogibeel Bridge was brought to fruition. After 15 years, the new parliament building was built. And last but not the least, let me tell your audience, they always say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And Narendra Modi showcased the hypocrisy of Rahul Gandhi and Manmohan Singh But Narendra Modi is not anti-Muslim. And I will take only 10 seconds to inform your audience. More than 31% of PM Awas Yojana goes to minorities, especially Muslims. More than 33% of Ayushman Bharat is allocated to minorities, especially Muslims. More than 36% of PM Ujjwala Yojana beneficiaries are minorities, especially Muslims. And more than 37%
Okay.
of PM Mudra Yojana beneficiaries are minorities.
So, Aishwarya,
don't sit here and give lectures to the BJP.
You asked about where are the Achhe Din. She's given out a whole bunch of statistics about where the Achhe Din are. And two, this whole business when you say Mr. Modi's government is polarizing, it's communal, so on and so forth, they turn around and say that, but we don't distinguish when it comes to welfare schemes, whether it is Ujjwala or Jan Dhan or whatever other welfare schemes they have. In that, they don't discriminate between Hindu and Muslim.
Zaka, in the terms of beneficiaries, she will come out on a television studio and tell you all of this, which is absolutely well and good. But the fact is that you use this us versus them narrative, and I'm going to answer Mr. Swapan Gupta as well. This us versus them narrative and the dog whistling of, we are under threat, and this entire foisting of victimhood on a particular population is what is absolutely problematic. She talks about a few examples of Karnataka. Ma'am, when it comes down to the 10 kilos rice, you were the people under the FSI that would refuse to give us rice, and you were willing to give the same rice at throwaway price for ethanol production. I didn't interrupt you. Please, ma'am. You basically incite.
Let her finish, please. Let her finish, ma'am, please. Let her finish. Yeah.
You talk about all these instances, your entire campaign in Karnataka. Does she want to go on? Can I please?
Aishwarya, make your point, yeah.
Yes, the point is in Karnataka, because again, you are bereft of issues. You rake up all these issues of, Hindu, Muslim and all these communal issues as a way to polarize. And that is the only plank on which you're trying to get votes. And from the logic of Mr. Swapan Das Gupta, who talks about, there's nothing wrong in the Prime Minister trying to get his core vote to come out. I'm sorry, I expected statesmanship from the Prime Minister. But sir, by that logic, we might as well go back to the state of nature where you again create these large divides in society just for electoral gain. At the end of the day, she talks about Achhe Din and Vikas. What is the rate of inflation today? What is the unemployment rate today? Look at the NCRB. The last time you allowed for an NCRB, any of report to come out, look at the crimes against women. Look at the rising atrocities against SC, STs and minorities. Forget foreign indices. Look at all those surveys and statistics that you have refused and debunked, even though they come from your own statistical organizations.
No, but Aishwarya, you haven't answered my question. One second. You haven't answered my question. You haven't answered my question, which is, fine, you can level all allegations at Mr. Modi's doorstep. Mr. Modi, the politician, Mr. Modi, the campaigner, is divisive. He indulges in communal rhetoric, so on and so forth. But Mr. Modi's government, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, when it comes to welfare schemes, his government does not discriminate. That's the question I asked you. How do you respond to that?
This entire idea, I can talk about a lot of other nations under the guise of propounding nationalism, said we are giving facilities to absolutely everybody while also ghettoizing and also completely ostracizing populations. While you talk about, I can dispute everything from Awas to the GST a state pays on Awas to Jal Jeevan, how much a state pays to each and every one of the schemes. I can counter it with facts, but a simple argument I'm going to make. You are a Prime Minister not of one religion. The last I checked, you're a Prime Minister for everybody who is an Indian, and the fact that you will other an entire community just to get, as Mr. Swapan said, to get your core voters to come out is absolutely shameful. And Zaka, the one response nobody's given. Sanju has given me 100 different examples of Vikas. If there was so much Vikas, why is the Prime Minister, whose track record is apparently, absolutely wonderful and not abysmal at all, why has he not made even one reference of his development anywhere? एक जगह जाए तो मंगलसूत्र के बारे में बात करते हैं, दूसरे जगह जाए तो और something else, emotive issues, because he is
one second. I gave you a platform to make. I mean, you gave out your achievements. You gave out how the government is non-discriminatory when it comes to welfare schemes. Now I need to get my closing comments from Swapan Das Gupta and from Veer Sanghvi. Swapan Das Gupta, the point that Aishwarya and the Congress are making, Mr. Modi is not just, he's not a Panna Pramukh. He's the Prime Minister of this country. He's the Prime Minister of 140 crore Indians, which includes 20 crore Muslims. When he says, Congress, आपकी संपत्ति, आपके मंगलसूत्र, आपके जेवर छीन लेंगे और दे देंगे घुसपैठियों को और जिनके ज्यादा बच्चे हैं उनको दे देंगे. That's not a good look. No, not just
Well,
a
it's
good
not a
look.
good
That's
look.
that's
Well, it's certainly not a good look, but unfortunately, Zaka, you must find out that there are large parts of India, and I spend most of my time these days in eastern India, where a large section of the so-called benefits, welfare benefits of the state are being accrued to the hands of people who have absolutely no right to be in India. And they have been allowed to come in by people who are constituents of the so-called India Alliance. So the fault lines didn't begin with Mr. Modi. The fault lines are pre-existing. And the fault lines are so glaring that the Congress that doesn't bat an eyelid when it boycotts the Ayodhya ceremony, when it thinks that that is not really worth going to because it touches the hearts of the majority of the people of India. It doesn't think that it's worth celebrating the end of Article 370 because it feels that only one section has been wronged. So it's this attitude of minorityism, trying to think that there is a common citizenship, but there is a particular sense of separateness which is allowed to other people. And it's that philosophy which has been there. And that is the philosophy which Modi has actually attacked. And that's a sitting duck target. And as far as development is concerned, yes, every speech of his, I even heard with rapt attention his speech in Munger today, where he again mentioned the Mangal Sutra, but it was also preceded and it was coupled. It was coupled with a long elaboration of the type of development or of the type of benefits which had accrued to a poor state like Bihar. So it's very much there. It's the pity that the Congress people have only chosen because they thought that because they could cite the absolute immiserization of the people and people would vote against it. Now, but as the CSDS Lokniti survey is quite clear, yes, there are certain economic indicators which suggest an element of distress in certain parts. But people are not voting according to that because they are voting for a man who's a strong leader. They are voting for a man who's given India a sense of identity. Now, you may like it, you may dislike this, but that's the way the people are.
Okay.
And the people are voting in that fashion.
Veer Sanghvi, forget about everything else. The Congress manifesto itself has a dedicated section on minorities and minority welfare. And it starts off with the line saying that the Congress party will do what it takes to ensure that minorities have a fair share. Now, A, who defines what is fair share? And B, why should only minorities have a fair share? Everyone in this country should have a fair share.
Agreed. I have no problems with that. In fact, I was very unhappy when Manmohan Singh made the speech that Mr. Modi is quoting. But on the other hand, if you look at what Manmohan Singh did in government and take exception to that, that's one thing. To pick on a speech is another. The time Manmohan Singh made that speech, he was Prime Minister. So did he act on it and give Muslims a greater share of resources than Hindus? I'm not sure. The BJP has still to make that point. As for a fair share, I think the argument is that Muslims have been denied a fair share against this under this government, and now we will give it to them. I don't necessarily think you need to say that, but Muslims may think differently, particularly after they've heard the Prime Minister's latest speeches.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. One thing is very, very clear, that the ratcheting up of the rhetoric, if you will, the ratcheting up of the heat on the campaign trail certainly seems to have happened between the first and the second phases. Whether or not this will translate into a rising voter turnout, if you will, in the second, third, fourth, fifth phases, we'll wait and see. As of now, the data that we have as far as phase 2 is concerned, as we close out this part of the debate, is as of 5 p.m., there still seems to be a gap between the 2019 figure in states like Rajasthan, even in states like Kerala, where generally the voter turnout is high. The 2019 turnout has still not been matched. Whether that gap will be closed, we don't know. But if there is a 2 to 4% fall from the 2019 figures, how may that affect, and which voter may that affect more than another? That is something we'll have to wait and observe.